There's a very specific magic to the single-player games we got in the 2000s. During this decade, I really think that the single-player campaigns were never treated as afterthoughts or glorified tutorials for multiplayer modes. They were the main event. I am talking about games that fundamentally rewired our brains. So these titles hold up because they were built on foundations of pure, really that unfiltered game design, tightly paced narratives, incredible environmental storytelling, and just satisfying mechanics. So yeah, let's talk about some of those titles today in this video. So look, before IO Interactive became permanently tied to the Hitman franchise, they put out this absolute fever dream of an alternate history shooter that somehow managed to turn a regular New York City plumber into a heavily armed guerrilla warlord. Freedom Fighters hit the scene in 2003, and looking back, it is downright criminal that we never got a proper sequel, because the mechanics buried in this game were light years ahead of the competition. The setup really is this pure Red Dawn action movie cheese. Basically, the Soviet Union suddenly invades Manhattan, and you, Christopher Stone, trade your pipe wrench for an assault rifle to lead the underground resistance. But what actually makes Freedom Fighters a legendary title is not the B-movie plot. It is the flawless, shockingly intuitive squad command system. Long before games were bogging us down with complicated radial menus and pause screens to control AI companions, IO Interactive gave us 3 simple commands on the controller: follow, attack, and defend. That was the entire tactical suite. And the craziest part, your squad actually listened. They aggressively took cover, they provided legitimate suppressing fire, and they cleared rooms with a level of raw competence that puts modern NPC companions to shame. You would start a mission sneaking through the sewers alone and end it storming an enemy stronghold with up to 12 rebels at your back, feeling like an absolute tactical genius commanding a small army. The game also featured an interconnected level design that was incredibly forward-thinking for the PS2 and original Xbox era. The maps were not isolated bubbles. If a Soviet attack chopper was mercilessly pinning your squad down in a city street, you could back out, travel to a completely different neighborhood, fight your way to a fuel depot to blow up the enemy helipad, and then return to the first area to find the skies completely clear. Your sabotage efforts had direct, tangible consequences on the battlefield, making the resistance feel like a dynamic, living campaign rather than a linear shooting gallery. You were actually strategizing, picking your targets based on what would make the final assault easier. Then there's the atmosphere, heavily carried by Jesper Kid's phenomenal, iconic soundtrack. He blended dark, pulsating electronic beats with massive, booming Hungarian choirs, creating a soundscape that made every single firefight feel like an epic, desperate struggle for survival against an unstoppable machine. Pushing through the snow-covered, war-torn streets of Brooklyn while that heavy choral music swelled in the background really, I think, remains an unmatched vibe. Tomb Raider Legend. If you were a gamer in the mid-2000s, you probably remember that Tomb Raider was in a really rough spot. Angel of Darkness had basically face-planted and everyone was wondering if Lara Croft was just a 90s relic. Then, in 2006, Tomb Raider Legend dropped, and honestly, it felt like the series finally figured out how to exist in the modern era. What I love about Legend is that it actually lets Lara have a personality. She's witty, she's clearly having a blast, and for the first time, she wasn't just a silent avatar jumping on blocks. She had 2 buddies, Zip and Alistair, constantly chirping in her ear over the radio. Some purists hated that, but for me, it made the whole thing feel like a big-budget action movie. You're globetrotting from the rainy rooftops of Tokyo to the snowy mountains around the world, and the vibe is just perfect for Tomb Raider. The gameplay was the real game changer though. They threw out that clunky tank control movement from the PS1 days and gave us something fluid. You could actually swing on a magnetic grapple, do mid-air slow-mo shots like you're in the Matrix, and the platforming felt instinctive rather than a math problem. Yeah, it's a bit short, and those motorcycle levels are, well, they're definitely of their time, but as a package, it's pure, high-octane fun. It's that perfect Saturday afternoon game where you're not stressed out by 100 side quests, you're just raiding tombs, solving some physics puzzles, and feeling like the coolest person on the planet. If you haven't played it since 2006, it still holds up as the definitive rebound for the franchise. Beyond Good and Evil 2003 is the definition of a cult classic. Back in 2003, it felt like this game just came out of nowhere. It didn't have the massive hype of a Halo or a Grand Theft Auto, but if you were lucky enough to play it, you knew you were holding something special. It's got such a unique vibe. You're Jade, a photojournalist living in a lighthouse with a bunch of orphans and a talking pig named Paige, who is honestly one of the best sidekicks ever. The world of Hillis was just so cozy, but also weirdly unsettling. You've got these alien invaders called the Domzi, constantly attacking, and the more you dig into the story, story, the more you realize the protection force meant to be saving everyone is actually sketchy as hell. The gameplay was a total mix of everything. One minute you're sneaking around a government facility taking pictures of conspiracies, the next you're racing your hovercraft through the canals, and then you're in a Zelda-style dungeon whacking robots with a Daijo staff. It shouldn't have worked, but it all flowed together perfectly. But the real heart of the game was the photography. In an era where every other game was just shoot this, kill that, Beyond Good and Evil asked you to slow down and document the world. Taking pictures of rare species to fund your rebellion felt so much more rewarding than just grinding for XP. It's one of those games that just has a soul, you know? It's colorful, it's got a weird sense of humor, and it's genuinely emotional. It's a tragedy we've been waiting forever for a sequel, but the original still holds up because there's still nothing else that feels quite like it. It's a pure vibe game before that was even a thing. Psychonauts. Talk about a game that was way too smart for its own good back in 2005. Psychonauts is easily one of the most creative things to ever come out of that era. Tim Schafer and the crew at Double Fine basically took a platformer and turned it into a psychedelic trip through people's subconscious. And honestly, it's still a masterpiece. You play as Raz, this circus kid who runs away to a summer camp for psychic spies, but instead of just hiking or making friendship bracelets, you're literally jumping into people's brains. And that's where the game gets legendary. Every single level is a completely different world based on someone's mental baggage. One minute you're in a 1950s suburbia nightmare where everything is a conspiracy. Shout out to the Milkman conspiracy, probably one of the funniest levels in gaming history. And the next, you're a giant monster in a city of lungfish. Or you're playing a tabletop war game inside a descendant of Napoleon's head. Most games struggle to have one good idea. Psychonauts had like 50 and threw them all at the wall. What really sticks with me though isn't just the weirdness, it's how much heart it has. It handles stuff like trauma, phobias, and hidden secrets in a way that's hilarious, but also kind of sweet. You actually start to care about these weirdos because you've literally seen their deepest thoughts. The writing is what really seals the deal. It's genuinely funny. Not video game funny, but actually clever. Every camper at Whispering Rock has a distinct personality, and poking around the camp to hear their dialogue was half the fun. You really felt like this weird kid trying to prove yourself while uncovering a massive conspiracy involving stolen brains and giant tanks. Sure, the meat circus level at the end was frustrating enough to make you want to throw your controller through a window, and the platforming could be a little floaty, but you didn't care because you just wanted to see what kind of insanity was behind the next door. It's a game that respects your imagination and treats the platforming genre like a canvas for art rather than just a series of jumps. If you missed this one back in the day, you missed out on the absolute peak of 2000s creativity. Okami 2006. If we're talking about games that are literally art in motion, we have to talk about Okami. This game dropped right at the very end of the PS2's life cycle in 2006, and honestly, it felt like a parting gift from Clover Studio. It's one of the most beautiful things ever put on a console, but because everyone was busy saving up for the PS3 or the Wii, a lot of people totally slept on it. They're lost, man, because Okami is a freaking journey. You play as Amaterasu, the Japanese sun goddess who's taken the form of a majestic white wolf. The world has been leached of its color and life by an ancient 8-headed demon, and your whole job is to run across the countryside and bring the color back. It sounds simple, but the way they pulled it off was genius. The entire game looks like a traditional Japanese sumi inkwash painting. When you run, flowers literally bloom in your paw prints. When you restore a cursed area, a wave of vibrant color and life explodes across the screen. It was doing open world beauty way before it was a standard industry trope. But the real wow factor was the celestial brush. This was such a cool tactile mechanic. You'd press a button to freeze the world like a canvas, and then you'd literally draw shapes on the screen to interact with the environment. Need to cut a rock in half? Draw a straight line across it. Want to make a withered tree bloom? Draw a circle around it. Need the sun to come out? Just draw a big circle in the sky. It made you feel like you were actually painting the story as you went along. It's the kind of mechanic that felt like magic back then, and honestly still feels more innovative than half the stuff we see today. The game is massive too. Just when you think you're reaching the final boss, the world opens up and you realize you're only a third of the way through. It's heavily inspired by The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, but it has so much of its own flavor. The weird folklore, the hilarious little bug artist Isun who lives in your fur, and the sheer scale of the boss fights. The Saboteur 2009 basically went out in a blaze of glory with this one. The Saboteur dropped right at the tail end of the decade, and it is the ultimate hidden gem for anyone who loves a good revenge story. You're Sean Devlin, this hard-drinking, foul-mouthed Irish race car driver who gets stuck in Nazi-occupied Paris. It's essentially Grand Theft Auto meets Inglourious Basterds, and it is every bit as awesome as that sounds. The coolest thing about this game, the thing that honestly blew my mind back in 2009, was the will to fight mechanic. When you start, Paris is literally black and white. It's grainy, depressing, and noir as hell, with the only pops of color being the glowing red of Nazi banners and the yellow of their spotlights. It looks incredible, but as you start blowing up fuel depots, assassinating generals, and helping the French resistance, color literally bleeds back into the world. Streets turn vibrant, people start fighting back in the alleys, and the music shifts. It's such a satisfying visual way to see your progress. You aren't just checking boxes on a map, you're literally bringing the light back to the city.
First we'll knock up a friend of mine. He can help us with Dr. Kessler.
And your friend?
The gameplay was a wild mix. You've got this parkour light system where you're scaling the Eiffel Tower or leaping across the rooftops of Montmartre to escape a pursuit. Then you've got the stealth, where you can steal a uniform to slip past checkpoints, until you get too close and some officer realizes you're a giant Irishman who definitely doesn't belong there. And when the stealth inevitably fails, the gunplay is chunky, loud, and chaotic. Diving into a trench with a Tommy gun while Feeling Good plays on the radio is a core gaming memory for me. It's definitely got that 2000s jank in some places. The driving can be a bit floaty, and the climbing isn't exactly Uncharted 4 smooth, but the atmosphere really carries it, I would say. It's got a gritty, cinematic vibe that most open world games today are too afraid to touch. It's a tragedy Pandemic shut down right after this released, because Sean Devlin deserved a whole trilogy. If you want a game where you can climb a cathedral, smoke a cigarette on the roof, and then base jump off after blowing up a Zeppelin, this is your masterpiece. Bully 2006. People love to call it GTA in a school, but honestly, that's doing it a disservice. If there was one game that perfectly captures that mid-2000s Rockstar lightning in a bottle, it's Bully. This was such a massive pivot for them. Everyone expected GTA in a school, and while you could definitely cause some chaos, the game had way more heart and charm than anyone gave it credit for. You're Jimmy Hopkins, this tough-as-nails kid with a shaved head and a serious attitude problem, dumped at Bulworth Academy, basically the worst boarding school in the world, and you have to navigate the social hierarchy of jocks, nerds, preppies, and greasers. What made Bully legendary wasn't just like the mischief stuff, it really was how lived in the world felt, you know? Like, the map I think was way smaller than any GTA map, but it was really dense. Every NPC had a name, a unique look, and a personality. You actually had a schedule. You had to bike to class to play these mini games like English word scrambles or chemistry rhythm games to unlock perks like better social interactions or firecrackers. It turned the boring routine of school into a gameplay loop that was actually addictive. You'd find yourself checking your watch in-game thinking, crap, I've got gym in 10 minutes, but I really need to finish tagging this building. The combat was a blast too. Slingshots, stink bombs, marbles, and itchy powder. Taking down a massive jock with a perfectly aimed spud cannon felt just as rewarding as any high-stakes heist. Oh, and they had some of the best OST too. Like, I still to this day have many saved in my PC folder and even use while making videos. Like, Sean Lee's soundtrack is an all-time great. That funky walking bass line that kicks in while you're just wandering the halls is permanently burned into my brain. It gave the whole game this mischievous, bouncy energy that made even just walking to the cafeteria feel like an adventure. I think it's one of those rare games that feels nostalgic even if you didn't play it as a kid. We've been begging for Bully 2 for nearly 2 decades now, but honestly the original is so tightly constructed and full of character that it still holds up as a masterpiece of the era. It's the ultimate schools out fantasy. We cannot talk about the 2000s without bowing down to Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. This game was a total stop what you're doing and look at this moment in 2003. Before Ubisoft got obsessed with climbing towers and clearing map icons, they created this tight, poetic, and incredibly fluid adventure that basically reinvented how we move in 3D spaces. It's the grandfather of Assassin's Creed and Uncharted, but honestly, it's got a vibe that neither of those series ever quite captured. The biggest thing was the movement. Before this, platforming in 3D was usually clunky. You'd miss a jump because because of a bad camera angle and just die. But Sands of Time introduced the wall run. Seeing the prince sprint horizontally across a wall, leap off a pole, and swing into a window felt like magic. It turned the environment into a playground. You weren't just playing a level, you were performing this beautiful rhythmic dance through these gorgeous sun-drenched Accursion palaces. It felt athletic and graceful in a way games just hadn't achieved yet. And then there was the Dagger of Time. This was the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card that actually made sense in the story. You mess up a jump, you get skewered by a trap, just hold a button, watch the screen ripple and rewind, and try again. It completely removed the frustration of trial and error gaming. It kept the momentum going, which was huge because the flow was everything in this game. But what really sticks with me, and what I think makes it a legendary human story, is the relationship between the prince and Farah. This wasn't some save the silent princess trope. They spent the whole game bickering, flirting, and slowly starting to trust each other while trapped in a nightmare. The prince starts off as this arrogant kid trying to impress his dad, and by the end, he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The way the story is told, as a literal narration by the prince to a sleeping Farah, is one of the coolest framing devices ever. If you died, he'd even say, no, that isn't how it happened, before you rewound. The atmosphere was just peak. It had this 1001 Nights fairy tale feel, with soft lighting, swirling dust motes, and a soundtrack that blended rock guitars with traditional Middle Eastern instruments. It felt exotic, dangerous, and incredibly cozy all at once. Mafia, The City of Lost Heaven, 2002. I have to talk about the original Mafia. This wasn't just another open world game trying to ride the coattails of Grand Theft Auto 3. While GTA was all about chaotic, arcadey fun and causing as much mayhem as possible, Mafia was something much more grounded, serious, and honestly, a lot more human. It felt like playing through a classic Scorsese or Coppola movie, but instead of just watching the tragedy unfold, you were the guy behind the wheel. You play as Tommy Angelo, a regular cab driver in the 1930s who gets pulled into the Salieri crime family basically by accident. What made this game legendary was the commitment to the bit. It didn't care if it frustrated you, it wanted you to feel the weight of being a mobster in the Great Depression. The cars didn't handle like Ferraris, they felt like heavy, clunky boats that struggled to go up hills. And the police, they weren't just there for high-speed chases, they'd pull you over for speeding or running a red light. It forced you to actually inhabit the world of Lost Heaven rather than just treat it like a playground. The missions were pure cinema. Everyone remembers the infamous racing mission, which was brutally hard but made you feel like a god when you finally won. But the real gold was in the hits and the heists, sneaking into a mansion under the cover of a thunderstorm, or that incredible shootout in the church. These moments had a gravity to them that most games at the time couldn't touch. The stakes felt real because Tommy wasn't some crazy invincible superhero gangster. He was a guy who was clearly over his head, watching his life and his morals slowly crumble as he climbed the ranks. And man, that ending. No spoilers for the 3 people who haven't played it, but it's one of the most haunting, grown-up finales in gaming history. It didn't give you the typical Hollywood high, it gave you a lesson about loyalty and the cost of the life you chose. The orchestral score, the thick atmosphere of the smoky bars, and the way the city changed over the years as you progressed, it all added up to an experience that felt way ahead of its time. It proved that open worlds could be used for tight, linear storytelling that actually meant something. If you want to see where the prestige side of gaming really started to find its legs, Mafia is the blueprint. In my opinion, it really is one of those tone-cold classics.
Okay, come on out, you bastard.
We have to talk about the moment the PS2 officially was reaching its final form with the original God of War. Obviously, like before Kratos was a weary dad trekking through the snow, he was a relentless, ash-covered force of nature tearing through ancient Greece, and man, the sheer scale of this game was unlike anything we'd ever seen on a console. Like, right from the jump, literally the opening level on the Aegean Sea, the game just smacks you with the boss fight against the Hydra that felt impossible for a PS2 to even render. Like, you were fighting a monster that felt like it was the size of a skyscraper, skyscraper while the ship was tossing and turning beneath you. It set the tone perfectly. This wasn't going to be a polite little action game. It was loud, it was angry, and it was epic in the truest sense of the word. The genius of God of War was the combat flow. The Blades of Chaos are arguably one of the greatest weapons in gaming history. The way they felt, the weight, the chains rattling, the arcs of fire as you swung them, it turned combat into a rhythmic, brutal ballet. David Jaffe and the team at Santa Monica Studio nailed the game feel so well that you felt every hit. And let's be real, the quick time events, their QTEs, actually felt cool back then. They weren't a chore, they were cinematic finishers that let you rip the head off a Medusa or climb a Minotaur like a total badass. But what people forget is how good the actual adventure was between the fights. This game had some of the most macro level design of the era. Exploring Pandora's temple, which was literally chained to the back of the Titan Kronos as he wandered the desert, was a massive wow moment. The puzzles were huge, the traps were lethal, and the sense of verticality made you feel tiny in a world of gods. It felt like you were on a genuine grueling quest to do the impossible, kill a god. And our dude Kratos, man, he was such a specific vibe for the mid-2000s. Wasn't a hero, but like a tragic, haunted anti-hero who was basically too angry to die. The story of his past, the way he was tricked by Ares into destroying the only things he loved, gave all that mindless violence a really dark, heavy emotional anchor. You weren't just killing for the sake of it, like we were helping a broken man get his scorched earth revenge. So one of my favorite game series of all time, like before Uncharted Drake's fortune dropped in 2007, Naughty Dog was the cartoon mascot studio. They were the Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter eyes. Then they pivoted to this gritty but vibrant pulpy adventure, and it completely shifted the DNA of what a PlayStation exclusive was supposed to look like. It was the moment we realized consoles could actually pull off a believable summer blockbuster movie. The first time you see Nathan Drake, he's not some shredded stoic super soldier. He's just a guy in a half-tucked Henley with a dry sense of humor getting shot at on a boat. That everyman vibe is exactly why I fell in love with Nate. He stumbles when he runs, flails his arms during big jumps, and he mutters "oh crap" when a grenade lands at his feet. It felt human in a way that Tomb Raider hadn't quite touched yet. You weren't playing as a legend, but like you were playing as a guy who was probably way over his head but was too charming to quit. Also, the chemistry, the banter between characters, Nate, Sully, and Alina, is the gold standard. I love them so much. Like most games back then had these stiff wooden cutscenes where characters just stood there explaining the plot. In Uncharted, the dialogue felt snappy and improvised.
I'll take Die now. Listen to me, maggot.
Visually, this game was a massive flex for the PS3. That jungle was lush, the water effects on the jet ski levels were mind-blowing for the time, and the way Nate's clothes actually got wet and stayed wet was the kind of detail we obsessed over in 2007. The transition from cutscene to gameplay was so seamless it felt like one continuous ride. You'd go from a high-stakes cinematic argument straight into a massive shootout in a flooded ruins without missing a beat. Sure, if you go back and play it today, the 6-axis grenade aiming is a little janky, and there are probably way too many waves of enemies in the back half of the game. And yeah, it gets weirdly supernatural toward the end. Those descendants in the bunkers definitely gave us all a jump scare we weren't expecting in a treasure hunting game. Like shit had me calling my brother to watch me play and opening the windows. But the core of the game, the climbing, the crumbling ledges, the barely made that jump energy was pure, uncut fun. Uncharted 1 really was the blueprint, I think. It proved that you could have a linear cinematic experience that didn't feel restrictive because the world and the people in it were so damn likable. It's the game that turned Naughty Dog into the titans they are today and gave us the ultimate modern-day Indiana Jones. Far Cry 2, this game dropped in 2008, and it was, and still is, the black sheep of the series. While the newer Far Cry games are like theme parks where you're a superhero with a wingsuit, Far Cry 2 was a brutal, sweaty, malaria-induced fever dream in the African savannah. It didn't want you to feel powerful, it wanted you to feel lucky to be alive. The immersion in this game was absolutely insane for the time. There was no mini-map hovering in the corner of your screen. If you wanted to know where you were going, you had to physically pull out a paper map and a compass while you were driving a rickety Jeep down a dirt road. It made made the world feel massive and terrifyingly real. You weren't just checking a GPS, you were actually navigating. And man, the jank in this game was actually a feature. Your guns would rust and jam in the middle of a firefight, forcing you to hammer on the reload button while some mercenary was closing in on you. You had malaria, so your vision would go blurry and you'd have to stab yourself with a needle just to keep moving. Even the healing system was visceral. Instead of just watching a health bar go up, you'd watch your character literally dig a bullet out of their arm with a pair of pliers or snap a broken bone back into place. It was gnarly, it was stressful, and it made every single encounter feel like a desperate struggle. But the real star of the show was the fire. The way fire spread in Far Cry 2 is still better than almost any game coming out today. You'd throw a Molotov at a guard post, the wind would pick up, and suddenly the entire dry grassland was an inferno, trapping you and the enemies together. It was chaotic and unpredictable, and it made every mission feel like it could go sideways in a heartbeat. It also had the buddy system, where these other mercenaries you met would actually show up to drag your bleeding body out of a firefight if you went down. It gave the game this weird, lonely camaraderie. You are all just trash humans trying to survive a civil war that didn't care about you. Far Cry 2 is a legendary 2000s game because it had a vision and it stuck to it. Even if that vision was make the player suffer. It's gritty, it's brown, it's punishing, and it's one of the most atmospheric shooters ever made. If you can handle the malaria and the respawning guard posts, it's an experience that stays with you way longer than the cleaner sequels ever did. It's a masterpiece of survival before that even became its own genre. If you want to talk about a game with an actual soul, we have to talk about The Darkness. This came out in 2007 from Starbreeze, and it's the most emo a shooter has ever been in the best possible way. You play as Jackie Estacado, a mob hitman who turns 21 and suddenly gets possessed by this ancient, foul-mouthed cosmic force called the Darkness. But this wasn't just another power fantasy game. It was surprisingly quiet and intimate. There's a legendary scene where you can literally just sit on the couch with your girlfriend, Jenny, and watch the entirety of To Kill a Mockingbird on a grainy TV. No objectives, no shooting, just two people hanging out in a crappy New York apartment. It made what happens later in the story hurt so much more. When the game wants to twist the knife, it does it better than almost any big budget title today. The gameplay was wild too. You had your standard dual-wielding pistols, but you also had these two demonic, creeping dark tentacles over your shoulders. You used them to rip hearts out of chests to feed the darkness, smash light bulbs to stay in the shadows, or literally pick up a car and hurl it at a mobster. It felt heavy, brutal, and visceral. And the voice acting. Mike Patton from Faith No More voiced the darkness, and he sounded absolutely terrifying, like a gravelly, oily nightmare whispering in your ear the whole time. The atmosphere of those gritty New York subways and rain-slicked alleys was just, man, it was thick. It felt like a graphic novel come to life. It wasn't about being a hero, it was about a guy losing his humanity to a monster just so he could get revenge on the uncle who betrayed him. The Darkness is one of those games that proved shooters could be poetic and depressing, while still letting you impale a guy with a demon tentacle. It's a total cult classic that more people need to experience. Max Payne 2 is where the series really hits its stride. The first game was great, but this one feels more focused, more confident, like they knew exactly what they were going for and just went all in. Max himself feels way more human here. He's tired, worn down, barely keeping it together. Then Mona comes back into his life and everything gets messy again. Their whole dynamic carries the story. There's tension, there's history, and you can feel it in every scene. It's not over-explained either, which actually makes it hit harder. The storytelling in general is on another level. The inner monologues, the weird dream sequences, those graphic novel panels, it all blends together into this heavy noir vibe that just sticks with you. It's kind of depressing the whole way through, but in a way that works.
Until you fall back down to the same hole you were trying to escape from. Only the hole's grown deeper.
Gameplay-wise, it still feels insanely good. Bullet time is smoother, more refined, and just satisfying every single time you use it. You dive into a room, everything slows down, and the whole fight plays out like a scene from a movie. The physics add a lot too. Stuff reacts the way you expect, environments break apart, and it makes every shootout feel more dynamic. The levels are super memorable as well. That address unknown bit is straight up creepy, the construction site shootout goes hard, and even smaller moments like the cleaning lady section somehow stick in your head. There's a strong sense of place throughout the whole game. What I really like is that it doesn't drag. You can finish it pretty quickly, but it leaves an impression. It's tight, it knows what it wants to do, and it doesn't waste your time. Hitman Blood Money 2006. If you had to pick the moment Hitman really figured itself out, it's Blood Money in 2006. The earlier games had cool ideas, but they could be clunky as hell and sometimes just straight up frustrating. This one finally got it right. It basically hands you a level and goes, alright, do your thing. What makes it so good is the freedom. These maps feel alive. You're not running down a checklist, you're just dropped into a space and left to figure it out. One mission you're in some quiet suburban neighborhood, the next you're in the middle of a chaotic Mardi Gras crowd. Every place has its own vibe, its own rhythm, and you just blend into it. And the kills, that's where the game really shines. Yeah, you can go loud with the silver ballers, but that's not the point. The fun is making it look like nothing happened. Swapping a fake gun with a real one during a rehearsal, setting up an accident, pushing someone at just the right moment, it feels so much more satisfying when it all goes clean. Half the time you're just standing around in disguise, watching patterns, waiting for that perfect window. And when it works, it feels earned. The notoriety system was also a nice touch. If you messed up, left witnesses, got caught on camera, it actually carried over. Suddenly guards are more suspicious, your cover isn't as safe, and you're forced to play smarter. Getting that silent assassin rating wasn't just about the money, it was about doing the job properly. This is the one where Hitman stopped feeling like a weird experiment and started feeling like a fully realized stealth sandbox. It just trusts you to play your way, and that's why people still talk about it.